Good evening. This is Margaret Flowers. I'm the candidate for U.S. Senate in Maryland, Green Party, and welcome to Ask Margaret About. Tonight we're going to talk about foreign policy, and some questions have been submitted already, but before we get started in answering those, I just wanted to say that the Green Party's position and my position as well on foreign policy is very different from what you'll hear from the Republican and Democratic candidates, and that in the United States there's quite a lot of propaganda or misinformation that's given through the commercial media. So sometimes when I start to talk about foreign policy, people start to screw up their face a little bit, like, what does she mean? That's not what I'm hearing on CNN or MSNBC. So just want to put that out there up front, and there are alternative media outlets that cover different aspects of foreign policy that you won't hear in the commercial media, and one of them is our website, of course, popularresistance.org, but there are other good outlets as well. So let me just start off by saying that the Green Party platform and my platform when it comes to foreign policy believes very strongly in respecting international law, following the rule of law, also respecting human rights around the world, and respecting national sovereignty, which includes the sovereignty of indigenous nations. Yesterday, October 10th, was Indigenous Peoples Day, and so very important for us to remember the history of the founding of the United States and how that legacy continues even until this day, both here in the United States in the way that we treat Native American populations, but also how we treat other populations around the world. So with that said, I'm going to get started on the first question, and if you would like to ask a question, if you're obviously you're watching this, just put it into the comment section below this video and I'll try to answer your question. If I don't get your question in tonight, I will make an effort to answer it through the comment section. So ask a question if you have one. All right, the first question says, this week Russia is doing drills to prepare for a nuclear attack. 40 million Russians will be involved. Is this a real fear the Russians should be concerned with? So this is the largest drill that we know of that the Russian people are conducting as if they are being attacked with nuclear weapons. And I think that if we look at the foreign kind of policy in the world, the fact that the United States has placed so many weapons along the border of Russia, the fact that we've been doing military exercises close to the border of Russia, makes this actually a reasonable fear that Russians have. I'm not saying that I'm a fan of President Vladimir Putin in the way that he treats his population, but I think when we talk about suppression and violation of human rights, it's important that we also shine a light in our own country and look at the policies and practices here. But it's I do believe that in the face of kind of the aggression towards Russia that the United States has been showing, the refusal to even really sit down and talk with President Putin to try to create some sort of agreement, the fact that we are committed to spending $1 trillion over the next 10 years to upgrade our nuclear weapons arsenal in the United States does have me concerned and many others concerned about a nuclear attack. And it's one reason why people, I believe, should be very concerned about President Clinton, because she has been belligerent towards Russia and I think will continue to be belligerent towards Russia and could take us closer to some sort of real outright war. So we need to really revive our peace movement and peace efforts in this country, especially under a Clinton presidency. The next question asks, should the U.S. play any role in removing President Assad of Syria from office? And the answer to that, the simple answer is no. It's not the role of the United States to determine who is the leader of other countries. It's important for us to respect the sovereignty of other nations. There are real efforts going on within Syria in collaboration with others to create kind of a document that expresses what the people of Syria want. And so it's important that we step back and not interfere in countries and allow the people there to have the ability to create stability within their country and to push for the kind of government that they want. I think that it's the responsibility of the United States to, in some way, repair the damage that we have done in the Middle East so that people in countries like Syria, like Iraq, like Afghanistan, Yemen, can actually be able to meet their basic needs for food and water, energy, and be able to create some stability within their own country so that they can fight and push for the kind of government that they would like to have. The next question is, why is the United States moving most of its Navy to the Asian Pacific? So this is something called the Asia pivot. And over the years, the U.S. has been moving the majority of our naval fleet to kind of surround the borders of China. We are building and have built military bases. We built a military base on Jeju Island in South Korea against the will of the people there. We are trying to build a very large military base in Henoko in Okinawa, Japan, against the will of the people of Okinawa. They actually, even the governor of Okinawa is opposed to this. We're pushing on the Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe to change the intent of the Japanese Constitution. Since World War II, they have had a pacifist military, and under our pressure, Prime Minister Abe is changing the intent of the Constitution to allow Japan to actually go to war against another country if an ally goes to war as well. And of course, that ally would be the United States. And there have been massive protests against this change in the military in Japan, with hundreds of thousands of people protesting outside of the Japanese Diet in opposition to this. The Diet is like their Congress. In addition to that, the U.S. has been building its military alliance with Vietnam and shifting Vietnam to purchasing its weapons from the United States instead of from Russia. And also, of course, we have the Enhanced Defense Cooperation Act that we pushed through in the Philippines so that the United States has the ability to use the Philippines as a base as well. And much of this is done against the will of the people of these countries, and it's really to kind of surround and contain China as they continue to be a growing power and economy in the world. The next question is, what is the role of the United States in Venezuela? And so, the history of the United States intervention in South America is long and not very pretty, in fact. In Venezuela, we saw the rise of Hugo Chavez, who, was elected president in the late, I think it was like 1999 or 1998, somewhere around there. And the U.S. was behind an attempted coup on him in 2002, which failed. And since then, the U.S. has been intervening in Venezuela to continue to undermine the government and the Bolivarian revolution there. Of course, Hugo Chavez died, and the current president is Nicolas Maduro. And there's a lot of tension between the work that Hugo Chavez and Maduro tried to do to improve the lives of the people of Venezuela, create greater democracy, build clinics and schools and things like that, and the kind of wealthy class there who's allied with the United States, who doesn't want to see Venezuela go down that route. And so the U.S. has spent a lot of money and effort kind of training and supporting opposition to the Maduro government, and also really kind of giving a lot of misinformation about the Venezuelan government to the American public or people in the United States, saying things like Venezuela is a national security threat when that couldn't be farther from the truth. So all of this is designed to make people in the U.S. fear Venezuela, be opposed to Venezuela, because they have really been trying to separate themselves from the imperialist grip of the United States by creating alternative banks, the Bank of the South, which would allow them to fund development projects without having to rely on entities like the International Monetary Fund, which is heavily dominated by the United States. So they were really serving as an example of how to become a really independent South American country. And of course, that threatens our ambitions to control them and control their resources. All right, let's start with this one first because it kind of flows into the next one. And I'll take that. Thank you. Is the United States an empire? If so, does that increase stability in the world? So this is a topic that is not discussed very often within the United States. But if we look at the number of bases and outposts that the U.S. has around the world, over 1,000, and we think about the previous empires that existed in world history, like the British Empire or the Roman Empire, I think the largest number of bases and outposts that an empire previously had was somewhere around 40. And so compare 40 to over 1,000, and it makes it pretty clear that the United States is the largest empire in the history of the world. And the U.S. has also a long history of intervening and interfering in the politics of other countries, either overtly through coups or military aggression, or covertly through kind of supporting uprisings within countries, certain factions, to push them towards putting someone in power who's favorable to U.S. interests. And this is not creating greater stability in the world. If we look at, let's start with Iran. In 1953, when Dr. Mossadegh was elected, and the United States, and I believe that the UK was involved in this as well, British Petroleum had oil interests in Iran, created a coup against Mossadegh. So we had a leader who believed in secular democracy and was moving Iran towards a more democratic type of government, and instead he was overthrown, and in place rose this theocratic state. And there were other countries at the time in that region that were moving towards democracy as well, like Egypt. And so this has kind of, the U.S. intervention in that has, and our continued intervention, has really created chaos and destabilization in that part of the world. So it doesn't make us safer. And we're actually, I think, really at unprecedented levels of other countries looking at us and being very aware of what it is that the United States is doing, and having a deteriorating respect for our country, and that doesn't make me proud as someone from the United States that we're behaving that way, and I think that we can do a lot better. What is the impact of the empire economy on people in the United States? So the empire economy kind of refers to the fact that we spend so much of our budget on the military. If we look at our discretionary funding in the U.S., 54% of that goes towards the military. That's at least, what we know of that goes towards the military. There could be other funds as well that are going to fund it. And so, if you look at like a pie of our discretionary spending, you see this giant piece that goes towards the military, and then little tiny slivers that go towards things like education or energy, transportation. And so the money that, when we look at our failing schools, at our failing infrastructure, at the fact that we don't have a real comprehensive, affordable transit system, even our rail system is outdated. We know that it's because of we're prioritizing spending on the military rather than freeing up those funds to spend on needs that we have domestically. So it does, in fact, that empire economy is hurting us. And as we continue to get deeper into conflicts around the world, that money really that's spent on that is money that could be using to build up our economy and support people at home. So there really is a direct connection between what we're doing militarily and our ability here at home to take care of our needs. Do you support our $1 trillion investment in nuclear weapons reform? What will you do to stop it? This is from Joshua. I do not support the $1 trillion investment in nuclear weapons. I think that other countries who are interested in developing nuclear weapons programs are doing that really as a way to protect themselves from the United States. If we look at North Korea, which has been so demonized, and I'm going to say I don't fully support the government of North Korea, the way that they treat people there. I think we also don't treat people so well here in the U.S. But if you understand how many times a year the United States is doing military exercises right off the border of North Korea, as if we were going to invade them and practicing for invading them, one can understand that why they feel like they have to have some sort of a nuclear deterrent there. So what we need to do instead is to lead by example by beginning a serious program of disarming our nuclear weapons, and then asking other countries or negotiating, creating agreements with other countries to do the same. They're not going to back down until we back down, because we have the most nuclear weapons in the world. So that's what we need to do. And this is an interesting question. Russia is becoming the largest exporter of organic food, countering the U.S. investment in chemical farming. What are your thoughts on this subject? Well, we know that chemical farming is something that's really been pushed through companies, corporations like Monsanto, DuPont, Syngenta, Bayer. These companies that are creating seeds or patenting seeds, buying up seeds to control them, the ones who make and sell the pesticides. And this becomes kind of a downward cycle of poisoning the land, poisoning the water, residues of pesticides getting into our food. So they're doing it for profit, but it's hurting our health, basically, is what I want to say. And so we do need to move to more organic farming. I think the health savings from that would be tremendous, as well as moving towards more regenerative methods of farming, which have actually been shown to build up the soil, build up the nutrient content of the soil so that food is healthier, and also will help to sequester carbon, which has the added benefit of helping to reduce carbon in the atmosphere and the climate crisis. So if it's true that Russia is becoming a major exporter of organic foods, I think that that's a fantastic thing, and I don't have any reason to doubt that if you say that. But I think that we all need to be moving in that direction of more organic farming, localized farming as well. Okay. I would like to know if anything can be done about the atrocities that have been happening in West Papua. This is from Dawn. This is a situation that is not talked about in the media, and in fact there's I believe severe restrictions on media even going into West Papua to see what's happening there. But when was it? I think it was about 50 years ago that the Danish government was in control of West Papua, and the West Papuans won independence from that government. and were working towards, being an independent nation. And there were talks that actually happened in New York City, I believe, here in the United States, where we completely subverted that effort, and Indonesia moved into West Papua and has been an occupying force there for the past 50 years. And really a brutal occupying force. They have, I don't even know the number of West Papuans who have been killed, but it's many who have been killed. And part of the reason is that West Papua is a country that is very rich in mineral resources. And so it's something that, other countries would like to have control of their resources. And so there's really a genocide going on against the West Papuan people. They would like to be independent. And I believe that in the United States, this is something first that we need to be discussing so that people become aware of it. We need to put pressure on other countries around the world to join us in calling for Indonesia to end their occupation of the West Papuan people and respect the sovereignty of those people. So I think that would be two easily accomplished things that the United States could do to both expose what's happening there and to build international pressure on Indonesia. Oh, and if you want to learn more about that, I believe the website is called Free West Papua. All right. Over the last 5 years, the United States has embarked on a program of deploying advanced surface-to-air missile defense systems abroad. This includes the Aegis Ashore system in Bulgaria and Japan, as well as the Terminal High Altitude Area Defense System, or THAAD, in Poland and South Korea. What is your position on this matter? And please give us some analysis to support your position. Hi, Bob. How are you? So my position on the Advanced Surface-to-Air Missile Defense System, my understanding is that they're not all that effective anyway. And I am opposed to increasing kind of the militarization and the arming, placing weapons pointing at other nations. I don't think that we can solve our, foreign policy issues by being such an aggressor in the world. I think it's very important that instead we stop intervening in the affairs of other countries, that we instead become a cooperative partner with other countries, that we recognize the role that we have played for a very long time in the world of creating instability, and that we work to actually instead promote stability within nations and allow other countries to determine what type of government that they would like to have, and that we use international law to solve the problems that we have instead of just arming and kind of accelerating or escalating conflicts around the world. I'll take more questions, I see. Thank you very much. What trade deals should America pursue for a green economy? From Harry. Okay, so right now the United States is negotiating 3 major international treaties that are in part having to do with trade. The one that's the closest to being completed is the Trans-Pacific Partnership. It's been negotiated with 12 Pacific Rim countries and has been signed on February 4th of this year. And that agreement is going to be, President Obama is going to push for ratification of that agreement after the election, starting on November 14th. That and the Transatlantic Trade and Investment Partnership, another international agreement with Europe that is kind of stalled in the European Union right now. And then the third one is the Trade and Services Agreement, which is more than 50 countries and is really focusing on privatizing services, which is about 80% of our economy. In terms of the green economy, or if we even talk about the climate crisis, these international agreements really undermine our ability to deal in a meaningful way with the climate crisis that we face. The Paris Climate Treaty, which was recently completed and and the negotiations were finalized in December at the last COP meeting in Paris. The climate treaty actually is a non-binding treaty, a non-binding agreement. It's a voluntary agreement. But these international agreements like the TPP and TTIP and TISA are legally binding agreements. And TPP and TTIP will actually fast track the offshoring or the exportation of oil and gas from the United States abroad. And if we try to put laws into effect to, stop drilling for oil, stop fracking, stop the export of oil and gas, then those companies that are transnational companies would be able to sue our government for lost expected profits, because that would be considered what's called a non-trade barrier. And that case would be heard in an international tribunal, which is mostly staffed by corporate lawyers who leave their jobs and serve as judges in the tribunal and then make rulings, and then they go back to their jobs as corporate lawyers. And that their decision is final. It supersedes even our Supreme Court. So the concern is that if these international treaties go through, they will really drive more drilling and fracking for oil and gas. They'll prevent us from being able to stop it, and then we won't be able to really address the climate crisis in the way that we need to. So I am part of a campaign to stop the Trans-Pacific Partnership. We're actually holding an action camp and actions right after the elections. If you want to get more information about that, go to flushthetpp.org. It's a funny name, but there's a long story behind that. And over the last years, as we've been fighting these agreements, we, as a coalition of organizations, have created the largest movement of movements against these agreements. We've been successful in holding off Congress for years from giving the president something called fast track, which allows him to sign these agreements before Congress sees them and rush them through Congress. We pushed this fight into an election year and made it politically toxic. So all of these are huge successes that we have had. And the goal beyond stopping these international agreements is to basically send them a strong message that says, look, we've stalled the World Trade Organization negotiations. We have risen up multiple times and stopped these large, dangerous international agreements that have been, tried to push through, like the Free Trade Area of the Americas or the Multilateral Agreement on Investments. And we're going to continue to stop you from pursuing these rigged corporate models of trade. And instead, we want to see a trade negotiation process that includes more of civil society in the negotiations, that is more transparent, that has fundamentally the goal of raising up worker standards and wages around the world, raising up environmental protections, putting in place strong provisions that allow us or require us to take meaningful steps to address the climate crisis. These international agreements are right now being used as ways to enhance corporate power, but they are human constructs, and we could construct them instead to actually lift up people around the world. And that's the kind of international agreements and trade deals that we need to have if we want to truly build the new green economy and address the crises that we face. Okay, this question is, would you pursue the U.S. acceding to the ICC, so the International Criminal Court? This comes from Andy. And yes, I do believe that the United States should join the International Criminal Court. Right now, we have operated with impunity because we are immune to prosecution for war crimes that are committed. And we are committing war crimes. We have been committing war crimes, drone attacks on, civilian populations, arming and funding governments that are known to violate human rights and international law. We need to be held accountable for our actions so that we stop committing these atrocities, which are fueling insecurity around the world, fueling a negative reaction towards the United States and making us less secure? So the answer is yes. This question is it true that switching to renewable energy is a national security issue? And that comes from Ty. Thank you. So I would view switching to renewable energy as a national security issue, because many of the conflicts that we get into around the world are conflicts over resources such as oil and gas. And if we move to a clean, renewable economy, it would remove that need for us to get into these conflicts in the first place, and that would help go a long way to enhancing stability in the world, peace in the world, and our own security here at home as we stop, creating these conflicts. This question is, what are Chris Van Hollen's positions on militarism and war? So Chris Van Hollen is the Democratic candidate for U.S. Senate in Maryland. He comes out of a foreign service background and has really been groomed as a politician for most of his life. He served in the state legislature and then currently as a congressman, I believe, for the past 14 years. And so he is very much in line with the kind of standard Democratic Party positions on militarism and war. He supported the sanctions on Iran, and I do not support sanctions. Sanctions are another way of really committing violence against a country, but it's something that people seem to think is more acceptable. If we think about the sanctions that we placed on Iraq, there were 500,000 children who died because of the sanctions that we placed on Iraq, and I don't see that very different from going in and outright killing them. So sanctions are, quote unquote, humanitarian war. I don't support that. Chris Van Hollen does. He is supporting. Basically, he said that he supports President Obama's positions on militarism and would support allowing him to continue what he's doing. And under President Obama, we've seen record arms sales around the world, including to governments like the Saudis, who are arming people in Syria and fomenting the conflict there. He supports no-fly zone over Syria, which is something that will escalate the conflict there, especially with Russia. So I think that my positions and those of Chris Van Hollen's are very, very different positions, and that he will continue to protect kind of the status quo that we have going on here. Let's see. Oh, so we're getting into energy. That's totally fine. This question is, like in Colorado, would you consider giving rebates for people purchasing electric cars? I believe they give up to a $12,500 tax credit, and this comes from Edwin. So I certainly do support, making electric cars more available. I would have to look into whether tax credits were really the best way to do that. My problem with tax credits is that we live in a time now where so many people in the United States really don't have adequate funds to meet their basic needs. We have 25% of our population in debt. 50% of the population has 1% of the wealth. And tax credits really mean that you have the money up front to purchase a car. So I think that there need to be ways that we help transition off of fossil fuel-based transportation, but do it in a way that really doesn't just privilege those who already have the money to buy an electric car, but actually make it something that people at all economic levels who want to purchase cars are able to do. So maybe it's something more like subsidizing the purchase of an electric car. But yes, I do support moving to an electric transit. All right, need my glasses for this one. What's your analysis of the connections between militarism, neoliberal trade deals, and forced migration, what specific policies should be enacted to reduce violence at the U.S.-Mexico border specifically and against immigrants generally, from Owen. So if we go back to the first major neoliberal trade deal that we had, which is NAFTA, the North American Free Trade Agreement, back in the mid-1990s, there's a strong connection between these trade deals, militarism, and forced migration. So when we created NAFTA with Canada, the U.S., and Mexico, there were a lot of things that it did, but one of the things that NAFTA did was allowed the United States agricultural industry, where we heavily subsidized corn, the growing of corn, allowed us to flood the Mexican market with U.S. corn that's at a very low price. And so corn is a very big part of the Mexican diet, and farmers in Mexico were not able to continue farming because the prices of the corn were so low that they couldn't even make any money off of farming for corn. So it caused farmers to lose their farms, to have to move into urban areas, and of course that opened up land for big ag, foreign big ag interests to go in and buy up the land there and start kind of really industrial agriculture down in Mexico, which is also not good for the health down there. But it really had increased, it really caused a really direct hit to the Mexican economy. And then, when you have poverty, then people are forced to leave their homes to go where they can go to get a job and make money. So many people were coming up to the United States to do that. So then we get concerned in the United States with people who are coming in to our country without proper documentation, and so that caused us to increase our militarization along the border, where many immigrants have been killed because of trying to come into the United States. So there's a really strong connection between these agreements, the harm to economies, and then militarization. And it's not, in most cases, when people are coming to the United States without documents, it's because they're facing situations at home that drive them to have to flee their countries. And oftentimes the United States has some role in those policies. So what should we be doing instead? We need to stop interfering in the governments of Central and South America. We need to have, I don't know. I mean, I would really love to hear from people from some of the countries as well before I just start prescribing what the solutions are. But in general, stopping our interference, perhaps in some way repaying for some of the economic damage that has been done, creating trade that, as I said before, really lifts up working standards and protection of the environment, so that the economies of these countries can recover and stabilize, and people can stay at home with their families. And I think in general, if we had fair economies and treated other countries in a fair way, then we could all, around the world, all of us could choose kind of where we would like to live, and it would be more of a free choice instead of a forced choice. And I think we'd all be better off that way. So I hope that what specific policies should be enacted to reduce violence at the U.S.-Mexico border. I mean, I would say that instead of arresting and detaining people who are trying to immigrate into the United States, that we should treat people with respect as they do in other countries, and instead find out why they're coming here and reconnect them with family members if that's the case, help them to become integrated into our society, a more welcoming path rather than a militarized, violent path against immigrants. Let's see. If Monsanto is permitted to merge with Bayer and move out of the United States, would that affect our national security? It's an interesting question. So Monsanto, which is based in the U.S., Bayer, which is based in Germany, is trying to do a merger with Monsanto so that it would actually be based in Germany. And you may be aware that there's been a lot of pushback against Monsanto because of their genetically modified organisms, the GMOs, the pesticide Roundup that is used in concert with those GMOs as more and more is learned about the health impacts of Roundup or glyphosate, that it's actually a suspected carcinogen. And so Monsanto's bottom line has been kind of taking a hit. If Monsanto merges with Bayer, then it would become a transnational corporation and could then, if an agreement like the Transatlantic Trade and Investment Partnership, or TTIP, goes into effect, would then be able to sue the United States if we try to put in place policies that interfere with their profits. So I'm opposed to the merger, and in terms of actually affecting our national security, I think in terms of our food security, certainly this would have a negative impact on our food security. All right, here's a question from Edwin. It says, I would like to hear about your goals for Maryland. So, okay, we have a few more questions before we end. All right, my goals for Maryland. So, in general, there's a lot of different areas that need to be addressed in Maryland. We have significant areas of poverty in this state, and so particularly on the western part of the state and the eastern, and then certainly very stark inequalities here in Baltimore. So as a senator, what are kind of some of the things that I can do at the federal level to help with these issues? I think that one thing that Maryland needs is to have a really updated transit system that's comprehensive, that's run on renewable clean energy, and that connects the parts of the state. I think that if we had clean, efficient rail going out to the western part of the state that made it easy for people from central Maryland to travel out there on a weekend, that we have such beautiful mountains and Deep Creek Lake out there, that we would see an increase in the economy there. And I would love to see us putting in place more renewable energy out in western part of Maryland instead of moving towards fracking out there. I think that would also help western Maryland's economy to grow. In terms of Baltimore, I think that I would love to push for greater manufacturing. There is no company in the United States that makes clean rapid transit, so why don't we? We have excellent, engineers and steel workers and all here in Maryland. Why don't we create a real hub to build rapid transit or a clean transit, and that would provide a lot of healthy, good-paying jobs. In terms of the Eastern Shore, I think that we need to really help our agricultural sector there move to a more sustainable form of agriculture that builds up the soil. And I think there's a lot that we need to do with the risk of rising seas, which is a real risk. They're now saying maybe as high as 9 feet by, I think it's 2050. We need to do a lot of wetlands restoration along the Eastern Shore to protect those communities, and also change the way that we practice our agriculture there. As I traveled around the state, I saw a lot of issues with particular, narcotic addiction, and heard from the west to the east stories of overdoses and deaths. So we need to move towards treating drug use as a public health problem and provide treatment on demand instead of criminalizing it, so that we can help people to heal and become more productive members of our community, which would also go a ways towards increasing safety and security. I would love to stop the gas refinery and export terminal that's being built down in Lusby and Cove Point. It's going to be a huge emitter of toxins into that community, and also places that community at risk for some sort of a catastrophic event. It's also going to be driving pipelines and compressor stations and fracking throughout the East and also in Maryland. So we need to stop that and instead move towards clean sources of energy. I would love to see us get more funding for our schools so that we can have stronger public schools with career teachers who have job security and professional development and kind of the freedom to use their skills as teachers to teach their students in the best way that there's, meet their students' needs. I'd love to see us be really setting an example in the new economy. Moving to a public bank in the city of Baltimore and other cities, maybe even a state public bank, so that we keep our tax money here in the state, not paying millions of dollars of fees to Wall Street, and that we can really then use that money to serve a public mission, to leverage, to help community banks to be able to make smaller loans. This is a huge problem right now of businesses being able to get loans or credit, for small and medium-sized businesses. I would love to see us really provide more resources for the growth of small and medium-sized businesses, especially businesses that have some sort of worker ownership, like worker cooperatives that really allow workers to have control over their work environment. These have been shown to not only be, when they're done well, not only be more productive, but also that workers have a better life when they work in these types of things. Move towards more participatory budgeting so that people have more input into how our public dollars are spent. These are some of the goals just off the top of my head that I have for Maryland. What role should the United States play in the world? So this is, I think that there is this image that many of us grew up in believing that the United States was a role model for the world. And I would like to see us be that role model. I would like to see the United States show real respect for human rights. We don't often think about it in this country. The fact that we could be providing high quality, comprehensive health care to every person in the United States for the same amount of money that we're spending right now, but we don't. Tens of millions of people are doing without health care, and people who have health insurance are still facing difficulties paying for necessary care and facing bankruptcy when they have a serious problem. We could be providing everyone health care. And the fact that we don't, to me, it's a violation of our human rights. Similarly with education, we could be providing everybody with a high quality education. So I think that we need to set examples, and I didn't even mention mass incarceration, but this is another huge problem with the United States. Having a fifth of the world's prisoners, or a fifth of the world's population, 25% of its prisoners. And using solitary confinement, the fact that 80 or 90,000 people a day are in solitary confinement. These are all things that don't reflect positively on us, and so I think that we need to become a more law-abiding country in the world, a more positive force in the world, and one that really works to respect the sovereignty of other nations and be a cooperative partner. What, in my opinion, is our nation's greatest threat? Perhaps our nation's greatest threat is actually the fact that the wealthy interests are the ones that dominate our public policy. There was an academic study done, I think it was last year, by, I think it's Page and Gillen, were the two researchers. And they found that overwhelmingly public policy in the United States benefits the wealthy and not the people. And so when we see these giant kind of industrial complexes, like the military-industrial complex that requires more and more war and conflict so they can continue to sell their weapons, I think that's a huge threat. The medical-industrial complex that's forcing our health policy to be one that treats healthcare as a commodity, a profit-making center. Same thing is happening with education. The same thing is happening with private prisons and corporations that are using prison labor and paying incredibly low wages. It's the fact that these same corporations that benefit from these policies are the ones writing these policies, and so that is a huge threat to us, and that's why we have to build the political alternative. The Democratic and Republican parties are dominated by that wealth. They are beholden to it, and they are not going to go against it. It's up to us to create a political alternative that is not beholden to that corporate wealth, that's beholden to the people, and will stand alongside people and fight for the necessary changes. Because many of these solutions that we're talking about are solutions that are already favored by supermajorities of people in the United States. And so we are the ones who can create the political will to make them a reality. And we have to do that, or we're not going to be able to solve the crises that we're facing. What should the U.S. do about the crisis in Syria? Is Assad committing war crimes against his people, or is this U.S. propaganda? So let's start with the second part first. My understanding is that Assad has mistreated his people. There are a lot of countries around the world that mistreat their people. I mean, look at Bahrain, and the United States treats Bahrain as an ally. Same thing with Israel and the Israeli apartheid there, and yet we are increasing our aid to Israel. Saudi Arabia, which has beheaded more people than ISIS has this year, and yet they're our ally. But there has also, I believe, been U.S. propaganda to pump up this image of Assad as a brutal dictator. What should the U.S. do about the crisis in Syria? We have to recognize that we can't create peace or stability by supporting military response to what's happening there. Right now, two things that we could fundamentally do would be to stop the funding of ISIS, cut off their ability to move oil through Turkey and export that for sales, and stop the flow of weapons to ISIS, and then also to provide support for civil society groups who are organizing to try to create a peace agreement in Syria. So cut off funds, cut off the weapons, and help promote a meaningful peace process. Don't Democrats support ending wars and peaceful diplomacy? Why can't we vote Democrat for a more peaceful world? Ty. So contrary to their rhetoric, the Democrats are just as beholden to the military-industrial complex as the Republicans are, and are not going to go against that. We haven't seen them stand up to the policies that we've seen under the Obama administration of drone warfare, where we don't even have to know the identity of the person that we're attacking with a drone. It's just based on their behavior. If they look like they might be acting like a terrorist, then we can kill them, and that's caused so many innocent people to be killed. I guess the simple answer is we can't vote Democrat for a more peaceful world, because members of Congress are not really willing to challenge the executive office in a meaningful way. And as I said earlier, under President Obama, we've seen, many times higher level of weapon sales. We've seen expansion of our military, really moving very deeply into Africa, militarizing Africa, and aggression towards countries that we don't even have stated war against, like Yemen, like Somalia, Pakistan. We can't, and I guess what I wanted to say next was that, under a Clinton presidency, she will continue the policies of President Obama, and we can also anticipate that she will continue to be very provocative towards Russia and could actually get us into more of a conflict. So if you are against war, you can't vote for the Democrats. The Green Party is the only party that is promoting a foreign policy of peace. All right, I think that's it for all the questions. Thank you. I really appreciate everybody for so many good questions. I hope that I was able to give you some insight into how I would make my decisions as a senator. I want to give a shout out to Ian Schlackman. He is the Green Party City Council candidate for City Council District 12 in Baltimore, and he's having an event tonight. The address is 405 East Oliver Street. It's still going on if you want to head down there. It's called Voices of Baltimore, and we're going to head down there after this. And another event that we just scheduled today, I want to let you know about. It's on October 20th. There's a new documentary that was made by the filmmakers who produced the healthcare movie, and this is a sequel to the healthcare movie called Now is the Time, Healthcare for Everyone. And it features a lot of people in Baltimore who have been working for healthcare as a human right. I'm featured in it as well. And so really excited to announce that the filmmakers are going to be coming to Baltimore on October 20th, and we're doing a showing of that film, Now is the Time, at the Senator Theater. We booked a theater that seats 160 people, and we need to sell 70 tickets if we are going to actually cover the cost of the theater. So I hope that we can get people to turn out for that event. We're charging $15 a ticket if you buy them in advance, $20 at the door. So please go to my Facebook, well, you're on our Facebook page if you're watching this, but the Facebook page is Flowers for Senate. And you'll see an event there with a link to purchase tickets. Please spread the word about this and buy tickets and show up. We're going to show the film. It's about an hour and 10 minutes, and then we'll have 50 minutes for a discussion with the filmmakers and myself about how we move forward to get a universal healthcare system. And let's see, what else? Oh, we have a new YouTube channel. We are publishing short videos on the issues, and hope that you'll share these out through your networks to let people know about the campaign. We also are continuing to push to get into the Senate debate, the televised Senate debate on October 26th. So please sign the petition on our website, flowersforsenate.org. If you do that, we'll let you know about things that you can do to help us put pressure on the University of Baltimore Center for Public Policy for excluding me from the debate and get me into that debate. And as always, we need your donations. We need to raise $19,000 to get us through the end of this, through Election Day, in order to print materials, have volunteer teams ready to be at the polling places on Election Day to let people know about our green candidates. So it sounds like a lot of money, but in reality, that's just what it costs for us to be able to do everything we need to do to get us through Election Day and have the strongest turnout. And this is up to you guys. Let's win this campaign. Let's get me into the Senate so that we can fight for these changes. So please, if you're able to make any donation, do that at flowersforsenate.org. Spread the word to others and encourage them to donate. $5 or $10, $20, $25, all of this adds up. It makes a huge difference. As you, I'm sure, see, we can do a lot with a little, and we're working every day to get around kind of this real commercial media blackout on this campaign and reach voters, and it's working. We've traveled around the state, and people said that they've learned about our campaign through social media, so please do support flowersforsenate.org. And we won't be here the next 2 Tuesdays because we have events those nights, but I'll be back on November 1st for a final Ask Margaret About, and I'll see you then. And of course, reach out if you have questions. Reach out through our Facebook page, and I'll try to answer you. So thanks very much. Good night, everyone.